The story begins not with a scandal splashed across the tabloids, but with a whisper that grew louder, feeding on curiosity and decades of unanswered questions. It started as a theory, a chilling possibility that, if true, could unravel everything the monarchy had built. The late Princess Diana, beloved by millions, remembered as the people's princess, might have had a secret child. A hidden bloodline, buried in shadows, threatening the delicate fabric of royal history. Most dismissed it as fantasy, another tale spun by conspiracy theorists. But as the pieces began to align, as fragments of evidence emerged from the darkness, this theory gained a dangerous kind of weight. The first spark came in the form of a blurry photograph. A young man, his face hauntingly familiar, with the same piercing blue eyes and delicate features that once captivated the world. It was not just a passing resemblance, there was something unsettlingly precise about it. The angle of his smile, the curve of his jaw, it was as if Diana herself had been etched into another face, decades later. This image, leaked to the press, sent ripples through every corner of the British media. Questions erupted. Who was he? And why did he look so much like the princess who had been gone for over 25 years? At first, Buckingham Palace remained silent. The official stance was that the photograph was meaningless, another cruel fabrication to exploit Diana's memory. But silence only fanned the flames. Soon, investigative journalists began combing through Diana's life, revisiting old stories, forgotten moments, and medical records from the early 1980s. It was here that the most chilling clue emerged. A retired nurse, long thought to have vanished into obscurity, gave a statement that rocked everything the royal family thought it could control. She claimed that Diana, before her marriage to Charles, had been part of a private medical procedure, one in which her eggs had been retrieved for a so-called fertility test. According to the nurse, these eggs had been used, without Diana's consent, for an experiment that resulted in the birth of a child. The idea was horrifying. Could Diana have been a mother before she ever became the Princess of Wales? And if so, where was this child now? William first learned of the theory not through the tabloids, but through a carefully worded briefing from his private secretary. He laughed at the absurdity of it, at least at first. But then the photograph arrived on his desk. He stared at it, his expression frozen. The resemblance was uncanny. It was not just that the young man looked like Diana. He looked like William, a mirror of his own face, softened and yet sharpened by the unmistakable Spencer features. The palace attempted to quash the story. Legal threats were issued. Statements were prepared. But the public had tasted blood. They demanded answers. And when a second photograph emerged, this one showing the young man beside a woman who had once worked closely with Diana, the narrative spun out of control. Every newspaper, every social media post, carried the same question. Had the royal family been hiding a secret child all along? William initially wanted to ignore the scandal, but doubt gnawed at him. What if there was truth in it? What if Diana had been betrayed in ways he had never known? Unable to let it go, he quietly launched an investigation. A trusted aide contacted the man in the photos, then known only as Thomas, arranging a secret meeting. Seeing Thomas for the first time left William breathless. The resemblance to Diana was uncanny. Thomas, overwhelmed by the attention, knew little of his origins. His childhood was riddled with gaps and unanswered questions. When asked for a DNA sample, he agreed without hesitation. As they awaited results, the media frenzy grew. Theories flooded headlines. Was Thomas an heir? Did he have a claim to the throne? The striking resemblance to Diana and William only fueled the storm. When the results arrived, they confirmed the unthinkable. A 99% match to Diana's maternal DNA. William's hands trembled. This wasn't speculation anymore. It was fact. The revelation shook him to the core. What did this mean for the crown, for his children? The monarchy's carefully preserved bloodline now faced a hidden branch. Yet Thomas, later revealed as Edward, wanted neither titles nor power. only the truth. William, despite his turmoil, wanted the same. The palace, however, would not tolerate it. Charles, now king, was furious, seeing it as an attack on the institution. Camilla's reaction was icily sharp. Diana's name still haunted her, and this new scandal threatened her place. The pressure intensified. Edward was hounded by paparazzi, his life ripped apart by tabloids. Yet public sentiment stood firmly with him. People wanted the truth, even if it meant dismantling centuries of royal tradition. The growing noise left William with an impossible choice: protect the monarchy or protect the truth. He was torn between duty and justice, between the crown and the woman who had given him life. Then came the message. Late one evening, as he stood in his study, his phone buzzed. "You don't know the whole truth about Diana." The words burned into his mind. What truth? What else had been hidden? William knew the DNA test was only the beginning. Determined to dig deeper, he and Edward uncovered a box of Diana's belongings: photographs, letters, and recordings. One letter chilled William. Secrets so devastating they would tear the crown apart if ever revealed. The revelations intensified. A former aide confirmed Diana had suspected a child she would never meet and feared the monarchy would erase the evidence. With every clue, William's resolve grew stronger. His loyalty to the crown was firm, but his loyalty to Diana's memory was unbreakable. Then, Edward received a grainy recording of Diana, her voice tinged with fear. "If you are watching this, it means the truth has survived me." William watched in stunned silence. She had known. The monarchy was under siege. The press, the public, even insiders demanded answers. As William stood by the palace window, his phone buzzed again. "Edward is not the only one. The real truth is still hidden." The palace felt like a fortress under attack. Outside, crowds chanted Diana's name. Inside, Charles paced in anger and exhaustion while Camilla withdrew into icy silence. William knew the storm was only beginning. William, however, could not stand still. He was haunted by the video of Diana that Edward had received, a video that now lived on a secure flash drive, hidden in William's personal safe. Her voice was still in his head. "If you are watching this, it means the truth has survived me." It was more than just a message from the past. It was a warning, a plea, and William felt it was directed at him. Edward, now under heavy media scrutiny, had become both a symbol and a target. His quiet life as an artist had been obliterated overnight. Tabloids dissected his every move. He had been forced to relocate to a secure location after reporters camped outside his home, some even digging through his past for anything they could twist into scandal. Through it all, Edward's only demand remained unchanged. He wanted answers. Who had brought him into this world? Why had Diana's voice and likeness haunted his entire life? When William met with Edward again, there was no longer hesitation or distrust. They were bonded by something deeper. Diana's blood, her legacy, her pain. William saw the torment in Edward's eyes, the confusion of a man who had never asked for this spotlight. Yet Edward also carried a quiet strength, the kind that reminded William of his mother's defiance. The palace advisors, however, saw Edward as a threat. Meetings were held behind closed doors, voices raised, plans drafted. There were suggestions to neutralize the story, through PR campaigns, through discrediting Edward, even through legal means. But William would not allow it. He had already seen what silence and manipulation had done to Diana. He would not let the same machine destroy another innocent life. Still, the pressure was mounting. International media outlets were now involved. Documentaries were being produced, with insiders offering cryptic interviews about Diana's final years. Old acquaintances resurfaced, claiming to know pieces of the puzzle. Some were charlatans seeking fame, but a few voices rang with unsettling truth. One of these voices belonged to a former royal security officer, a man who had been dismissed in the 1990s after raising concerns about Diana's treatment. He came forward with a startling claim. There were recordings, tapes Diana had made, detailing her fears about experiments and children who might one day ask questions. The officer claimed these tapes had been buried by palace staff after Diana's death. If they existed, they could be the final blow to the monarchy's carefully curated image. William's heart pounded when he heard this. Could there be more evidence hidden somewhere? Could Diana have known about Edward, and more? He began his own quiet search, enlisting only 2 trusted aides and Edward himself. Together, they combed through archives, reached out to Diana's closest surviving friends, and pieced together fragments of her final months. Each discovery only deepened the mystery. In a storage unit rented by one of Diana's former staff members, they found boxes of letters, photographs, and diaries. Among them were cryptic notes, where Diana wrote about feeling like a pawn in a larger game, and fearing that they were watching her every move. The notes hinted at more than just press harassment. There were references to medical appointments I never agreed to, and something they will never tell me about. William read these entries late into the night, his hands shaking. It was as if his mother was speaking directly to him from beyond the grave. But the true shock came when Edward uncovered a second flash drive hidden inside one of the boxes. The files on it were encrypted, and it took weeks of careful decoding before they could watch the videos. When the first file played, William felt the ground shift beneath him. It was Diana, sitting in a dimly lit room, her face pale but determined. She spoke directly into the camera, her voice low and urgent. "If anyone is watching this," she said, "then I have failed to protect my children from the truth. There are things about this family, about me, that you must know. They cannot be trusted to tell it. They never will." The video cut out abruptly. There were more files, but most were corrupted or missing audio. What remained, however, was enough to ignite something in William, a fire he could not extinguish. He realized that this was no longer just about Edward. It was about Diana's entire legacy, about the corruption and silence that had haunted her life. Meanwhile, Charles grew visibly weaker. The stress of the scandal, combined with his ongoing health battles, made him appear older, frilier. He avoided discussing Edward, but his silence was telling. William suspected his father knew far more than he was letting on. Camilla, on the other hand, grew coldly defensive. She feared that the resurrection of Diana's story would once again paint her as the villain, undoing decades of carefully rebuilt reputation. The public, however, was unrelenting. Edward's face was everywhere. Public opinion polls showed an unprecedented shift. Support for William and Kate was at an all-time high, but the monarchy itself was teetering. The people demanded transparency. They wanted to know who Edward was, why he existed, and what secrets Diana had carried to her grave. William, caught between duty to the crown and loyalty to his mother's memory, felt himself standing on a knife's edge. If he revealed everything, he risked bringing down the very institution he was destined to lead. But if he stayed silent, he would be complicit in the same silence that had killed Diana's spirit. Then came the second video file. The moment it loaded on the screen, both William and Edward felt their hearts stop. The second video file was grainy, distorted by time, but Diana's voice came through like a ghost. She sat at a small desk, her hair falling around her face as she stared into the camera. Her tone was more vulnerable than the first recording, her words carefully chosen as if she knew they might one day be her only defense. "If you're seeing this," she began, "then they've tried to erase me. There are truths buried deeper than anyone realizes. They experimented on me. They lied. And there's more than one child. They will never admit it, but you must know." The screen flickered, and for a moment her voice was drowned out by static. William leaned forward, his chest tightening. Edward's eyes widened, his breath shallow. When the image cleared, Diana's voice grew sharper. "This family is built on silence and control. I don't know how far they'll go to protect their secrets, but if I don't speak now, it will all be lost. If you find this, promise me, don't let them win. Don't let them silence the truth." The file ended abruptly, leaving behind a suffocating silence. William sat motionless, the weight of her words pressing down on him like a tidal wave. Not one child. More than one. The revelation twisted through his mind like a knife. If Diana had known of another child, someone else hidden in the shadows, then Edward's story was only part of something much larger, something far more dangerous. The following days felt like a battlefield. William's tension with the palace deepened as Charles held an emergency meeting with senior advisors. Pale and visibly strained, the king insisted the scandal must end. "If these recordings are released, it won't just damage us, it will end us," one aide warned. Camilla, icy and silent, bristled at Edward's name, while William said nothing, his mind replaying his mother's words. Don't let them silence the truth. That night, William returned to his office, gripping the flash drive. Edward waited, tense. William stared out at the dark gardens, the crown feeling less like a symbol of stability and more like a shackle. Edward broke the silence, reminding him, "She wanted this to come out. If we do nothing, they win." William knew he was right, but the cost would be immense. The storm hit the next morning. Hackers threatened to leak the videos unless the palace spoke. News outlets counted down to what they called the biggest royal revelation of the century. Statements of denial poured out, but the tide had turned. The world wanted to hear Diana's voice, unfiltered. Knowing the chaos that would follow, William made a stunning decision. He called a press conference. The world watched as cameras lined the streets outside Kensington Palace. Standing behind a podium, pale but resolute, with Kate by his side and Edward in the shadows, William spoke of Diana's strength and suffering. He revealed that new evidence showed her life had been manipulated, acknowledging Edward as family without confirming every detail. "The truth," he said firmly, "is not always convenient. But I will not let my mother's memory be silenced. Not now, not ever." The press erupted. Some praised his courage, calling him the future of a transparent monarchy. Others declared the institution was unraveling. Charles, watching from Buckingham Palace, looked broken, his hands trembling. Camilla's fury was undeniable. "You've opened Pandora's box," she was overheard saying. "There's no closing it now." That evening, as the world processed William's words, Edward received a package delivered to his temporary residence. Inside was a single photograph, an image of Diana in a hospital, holding a baby no one had ever seen. There was no note, no explanation, only a date scrawled on the back. It was 2 years before William was born. When Edward showed the photo to William, they both fell silent. This was it. Proof that Diana's secret might be deeper and darker than they had ever imagined. William standing alone on the balcony of Kensington Palace, the photograph in his hand. Below him, reporters camped out, waiting for the next statement, the next twist. The night sky was heavy with clouds, and in the distance, thunder rumbled like an omen. His phone buzzed again. Another message from the unknown sender. "You've only uncovered the first child. There's another. And this one changes everything." Like and subscribe the channel if you want more secret from the royal family exposed.